A new coding assistant. If you're anything like me, you've been testing around different coding assistants, but more often than not, I still go back and forth with GPT-4, copying and pasting code, copying error lines and output from the code back to ChatGPT-4, and just going back and forth and wasting a lot of time and energy. I messed around with GitHub Copilot. I didn't mind paying, obviously, and I also played with Ada, or however you pronounce it, which I believe are like the leading players with regards to coding assistants at the moment. And eventually, as I said, I always kept on copying and pasting from GPT-4, or I just used Open Interpreter, which basically, you guys know, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I love Open Interpreter. So I've been using Open Interpreter just to write all the code for me. And then because it's so smart and so amazing, it just, whenever there are errors, it also knows how to fix the errors. So it's pretty much streamlines the coding process. And obviously I'm talking about simple stuff. Anyway, today I encountered a new coding assistant which seems very promising. I tested it out and I'm going to share with you a few of my impressions, and obviously at the end I'm going to share with you the score that I'm giving to the coding assistant. And the scoring thing is a new thing that I introduced the other day to my channel. I will elaborate about this later. And I also have an ask from you guys with regards to the scoring ladder, but let's get started for now. So this coding assistant is called Continue. This is the GitHub repository. Let me make the font larger for you guys. Let me remove MultiOn. By the way, MultiOn, I also did a video about it the other day. It's very cool and it's actually doing a great job. Let me just remove this. I will remove it from Chrome. I'll add it later. Yeah, so MultiOn, just quickly, because if you haven't seen the video, it's an agentic framework which operates on your front end, and from what I've seen and my impression, it actually does what it's supposed to do. So I asked it to post a Facebook post on my feed and it did so, and I asked it to order for me a book from Amazon and it was able to do so with very little instructions, almost no errors. So I highly recommend MultiOn. Now let's go back to the topic of the video. As mentioned, it's a GitHub repository called Continue. I will share the link obviously in the show notes. And basically what it allows you to do, it's a coding assistant, so you can answer coding questions. I'll make this even bigger. Highlight plus select a section of code and instruct code to refactor it. So for example, rewrite this to return a flattened list from a 3x3 matrix. Refactor this into an Angular flex layout on one line. Define a type here for a list of lists, whatever. It can generate code from scratch, and it can do a lot more. Let me just show you the documentation. It has a pretty good documentation. It covers all the things that you need to know. I will obviously share this in the show notes as well. With regards to the installation, and again, I apologize because I keep on saying that this channel isn't about installations, it's about implementation and applications. But since so many great tools have been popping up lately, I feel the urge to test them and see if they can streamline my process. And when I test them, I obviously want to share it with you, and I also cover like the installation. So the installation of Continue is very straightforward. You just go to VS Code and you can look it up in VS Code in the extension section. You write Continue and you just install this. You just install and you pretty much are good to go. Now Continue has a few models that it can work on. You can add them over here. You can decide which provider you want to use and which model. What I did in this case, I added the DeepCoder using Olama, but you can choose whatever any other file that you'd like. Basically, in order to run this from Olama, you just need to download the Olama file of DeepCoder in this case, and just change a few things in the configuration JSON. Just add the base URL and write the name of the model that you're using, and you're pretty much good to go. Now, this is the extension. It looks like this. Let me close this. Let's go back to the files. And what you can do here, you can basically ask it to write code. Can you write, we must, obviously, if it's a video about AI tools, we must ask it to write snake. Can you write a Python snake game for me? I'm kidding, obviously, just for the sake of exemplifying the process. And what I like about this, by the way, is the fact that I'm using DeepCoder, which is completely free with Olama. The tool is going to be as strong as the model that you're using. In this case, just for getting started and testing out, DeepSeek is definitely enough. So as you can see, it is writing down the code for the snake game. Not so interesting, but let's move on. Let's create a new session. So basically, what you can do with this coding assistant, you can do a lot of stuff, but as you saw, you can write code from scratch. You can also refer to all the open files. Let me close this down and close this down. So if I hit mention and files, this is basically the context window. So you're saying files, and you can ask it something about regarding the open files. So let's say, can you write a documentation for me? And you will see in a moment it's going to generate a documentation. And this is useful, but not so useful. I mean, it's useful for some people, but I don't think it's a game changer, but I'm just starting out with this example. Obviously, it is using DeepCoder to generate the code, the doc file, the README file, so it is going to be as strong as the model that we're using. Let's move forward. What you can also do is you can reference to the terminal. So whatever is happening in the terminal, you can ask questions regarding what's going on in the terminal. Can you explain to me what's going on? And obviously, I don't know what it will answer now because I don't have anything in the terminal at the moment. The warning message is from the PowerShell module. Name PSR read lines, which provide enhanced command line editing. So this is nice. Now let's move to the more interesting stuff. What I like, I think this is very powerful, is the fact that it can also understand wider context, and it can also understand your code base. And let's assume that you have a pretty big project, or you download or you git cloned a repository. Let's say you git cloned Autogen, and you're having issues with understanding what's the origin of the error, or you need to file all the instances in which you need to update your API keys because you don't want to use the environment file or whatever. You can use this code base. And let me share with you a bit more data about the code base. By the way, this is before I was contemplating which model should I use from Olama, and I found this, which you guys probably know. Some of you probably know. It's the DeepCoder repository, and here they have a comparison between DeepCoder, all the models, and the performance compared to other coding pre-trained model, and also in comparison to GPT-4 and GPT 3.5. So as you can see, DeepCoder Instruct has a very high score. I'm currently using, I think I downloaded this guy, which isn't as good obviously as GPT-4, but I think it's good enough just for the sake of testing. Anyway, going back to what I wanted to show you is the context. So this is the documentation again, code-based retrieval. Okay, let's just read this. Make sure that we're not missing anything. Okay. Okay, code-based retrieval. Continue is the name of the repository or framework or the tool, indexes your codebase so that it can later automatically pull in the most relevant context from throughout your workspace. This is done via a combination of embedding-based retrieval and keyword search. By default, all embeddings are calculated locally and stored locally. Currently, the codebase retrieval feature is available as the codebase and folder context providers. You can use them by typing codebase, as I showed you, in the input box, and then asking a question. The content of the input inbox will be compared with embeddings from the rest of the codebase or folder to determine relevant files. This is very powerful. This is actually pretty amazing. Here are some examples, common use cases that can be useful. So first of all, asking high-level questions about your codebase. How do I add a new endpoint to the server? Do we use VS Code's codeless feature anywhere? Is there any code written already to convert HTML to Markdown? It's also useful for generating code using existing samples as reference. So for example, generate a new React component with a date picker using the same patterns as existing components. We can also ask questions about a specific folder, and this increases the likelihood of relevant results. For example, what is the main purpose of this folder? If we have a source folder or we have an examples folder or whatever. How did we use VS Code, Codeland API, or any of the above examples? Here a use case where it is not useful, and this is also important to understand. When you need the LLM to see literally every file in your codebase, for example, find everywhere where the foo function is called. So actually I mentioned this before and it was a bad example. So for this you can just Control F and look for the instances that, let's say you want to update your OpenAI API key or whatever. Another bad example, I wouldn't say bad, another example of when not to use continue, this context retrieval, like the codebase retrieval, is when you want to review our codebase and find any spelling mistakes, and also for refactoring. It's not ideal. I won't go over the configuration. Let me show you just an example, a quick example for this, not here. So here, so codebase, can you provide an outline of what's going on this repo? So this is a repository of Selenium Base. I did a video about this a few days ago. Selenium Base is a very powerful browser automation repository. It stands out, at least for me, with two elements. First of all, it has a native anti-detect element, which seems to be working pretty well. And the second factor and second element that makes it so powerful, in opposing to just using Selenium, is the fact that you can record different movements in a web browser while Selenium Base recorder is on. And Selenium Base is going to record, as mentioned, all your moves, and then you can export it as a Puppeteer file. So for example, you can see over here, I just opened Google and I inputted a text, and then I clicked on a few search results. And basically Selenium Base was able to record all of these movements and generate code from these movements, and then I can adjust the code. I can use it in a bigger chunk of automation, etc. Anyway, so let's see what is continue providing. So it says, from looking at the code and files provided, it seems like a repository for Selenium base, a popular Python framework used for browser automation testing with Selenium WebDriver. The main components and features may include Selenium testing, custom commands, automation of UI tasks, integration testing, documentation and demos. It also says there are numerous files, README files that present which include instructions on how to get started, a guide on creating tests, explanations of commands, etc. And other stuff. We're not going to wait for this. Obviously, it's a bit slower because we're running Olama locally and we're using DeepCoder, but still, you get the gist of how powerful Continue can be, because basically it can also understand the context of your whole repository. So, okay, let's see what we covered. We covered writing code. We covered the retrieval of the whole repository as context. Let's see if I missed anything. There are a few more things. You can also use, let's say you're branching a piece of code, so you can also compare the difference between your original code and what you adjusted, and only ask Continue to refer to the differences. We also covered the fact that you can also analyze what you wrote in the terminal and the open files, and also analyze specific files. Yeah, so I think we covered the most of it. There are a lot of nuances and more things that you can do with Continue. You can read about all of it in the documentation. This is the documentation, which I mentioned a few times already. I'm pretty impressed by this project. I think so far it seems better than, my first impression is better than Copilot. I found Copilot a bit annoying, maybe too complicated to get up and running. The learning curve seemed too steep, in my opinion. So I'm pretty happy about how fast I was able to install Continue and understand what's going on, and already start implementing and using it and leveraging it. So I actually recommend it a lot. And this brings us to the final section of the video, and this is the new scoring ladder that I presented the other day. Basically, this is, let me open it. Yes, so I opened this in Canva. I'm not the best designer, but that's not the point. I hope you guys are not annoyed by the lack of my design skills. So basically, the other day I said that whenever I'm going to test a new repository, whenever I'm not going to build an automation and I'm just sharing with you my impression of a new repository, I'm going to put this on a scale. And the one end of the scale is I tested it so you don't have to. And I recall at least one tool that I tested that I really don't suggest checking it out. And on the other hand is take my money. So MultiOn was the first video that I did with this scale, and I said, okay, take my money because it seemed amazing. My ask from you guys is, we don't have a name yet for this thing, so name needed. We already have a few proposals, a few alternatives, but I want to keep this ask in the next couple of videos, see if a different alternative, which is better, is going to show up, and then we will rename this ladder. Now for the verdict of today, I was really impressed by Continue. I think it's going to be very valuable and a lot of fun to use, and also speed up a lot of things. I'm probably going to connect GPT-4 to it, so just so I know that the code that it's generating is going to be way more accurate and better than using Olama. Although there are also pros for using Olama. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is if you install this, and this is actually important, if you install this, you must know that by default they are collecting, let me see, by default they are collecting your data, and you need to turn that, if you want, you need to turn it off. Let me just show you telemetry. So Continue, let me make this bigger. Continue collects and reports anonymous usage information. This data is essential to understanding how we should improve the product. You can opt out if any. You can opt out anytime. So basically, just so you know that it collects data regarding your code. So if you want, you can disable this telemetry function. Now let's go back to the ladder. So I was saying that first of all, it cannot take my money because this is open source and it is free at the moment, so no take my money there. But I was very impressed by Continue. I think it's going to be useful. I'm planning to use it, at least give it a few more tests to see if it really makes my coding experience better and faster. Because I'm not a native coder, I'm sure that it can help me a lot, but I'll have to compare this to my current use, which is basically going back and forth with GPT-4 and copying and pasting, which is probably not the most effective nor efficient thing that I can do. So I think Continue might be very valuable. I also paused my subscription with GitHub Copilot, so Continue, which is also free, can be a very nice alternative. I guess that's it for today, guys. I was planning to do this video shorter, but somehow it was a bit longer than I expected. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, obviously leave them in the comment section below. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, if you can like the video, it would be highly appreciated. Obviously subscribing. And regarding my 2 asks, so if you have an idea for the name of the ladder, please leave it in the comment section. And my second ask, that if you have feedback regarding the video, the pace of the video, the volume, the way I explained anything, any feedback is highly appreciated. Also, obviously, constructive feedback and also good feedback. I embrace everything because I'm trying to improve, putting in the repetitions and improving with volume. I'm a big believer in volume, so just creating these videos as I'm studying this with you guys, documenting the process, and yeah, I really appreciate your feedback. And that's it. Until next time, keep on automating.